It does seem lately like there's been a lot of music right deals. Manis mentioned Bob Dylan, Stevie Nicks, Taylor Swift songs are also just bought by a PE fund. Why are we thinking now is the time and is a popular time to be investing in music rights as an asset class, more or less?
I think historically what's happened with music rights or filmed entertainment rights is that investors have brought a little bit of an unfair bias to the asset class. Specifically, they've seen it as very hit-driven. They haven't, I think, appropriately appreciated it for how acyclical it is. And I think with time, what investors have become more sophisticated about is that an intellectual property right at the end of the day is just an annuity generating asset. And just like any other annuity generating asset that's affected by things like interest rates, also there are ways of curating a portfolio that can actually get rid of some of the types of risks and what I think have been unfair criticisms that investors have really thought about historically about the space. So for example, saying it's hit driven. Yes, one song may be hit-driven, but a portfolio of 20,000 songs actually diversifies away that unique risk.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's almost like songs are a fixed income class, what you're describing, but how do you even value them? Well,
interestingly, songs, and especially portfolios of songs, because the hit risk nature of them can be diversified away, there's pattern recognition within how they perform, whether that's by genre or by vintage. So there's actually a quite mathematical and let's call it nerdy approach when it comes to valuing song rights.
Yeah, we love nerdy approaches here. But what about from the artist perspective? If you were to put on your former Rock Nation hat, if you were advising one of your former clients like Rihanna or Jay-Z, would you recommend that they sell their song rights?
It is a very personal decision. Obviously, artists, their craft is very personal to them. There is oftentimes a lot of personal narrative and story that goes into that. So there really is no one-size-fits-all approach. I think that for a lot of artists right now, it certainly makes financial sense because a lot of artists historically have made quite a decent income or a large portion of their income from live events. And with COVID happening, that income stream suddenly dried up overnight. You pair that with the fact that now interest rates are very low, these annuity generating rights are more valuable than ever. From a financial and personal perspective, it actually might make sense to sell those rights now. For others, where perhaps they're younger in their career, they're still expecting that touring will come back, and they're excited about that in the horizon, and their rights may be deeply personal to them. I certainly wouldn't fault someone for not wanting to separate with those.
Well, Vania, you're not just exposed to music here through your company, Epidemic Sounds. You're also invested in some film and TV content generators as well. How do you invest in ESG in the content industry?
That's a great question. You know, when it comes to ESG, we as a fund, because we invest in content companies, really focus on the S part of that, the social aspect of that. And getting a little bit more concrete, the types of companies that we invest in, the inputs for what they're producing is intellectual, it's creative. And so by definition, they won't be the types of companies that are polluting in rivers, for example, because they don't have big industrial processes. But the output of what they are creating drives culture forward. It actually helps create culture. And so we're very mindful of that. We want to invest behind management teams that are mindful of the fact that they have a great responsibility as culture carriers and creators when it comes to content. So we pick management teams that are aware of that feel that responsibility. Just to give you one great example, we're invested in Whip Studios, which is co-founded by Paul Lee and Matteo Perale. And they are a content producer out of Los Angeles that just sold a show called Uninhabitable Earth to HBO that will be produced and released shortly. And Uninhabitable Earth is all about climate change. So although we're focusing on the S part of ESG, it actually bleeds over into other aspects of ESG as well.
So what does that mean? What won't you invest in that doesn't fit that S part of the ESG?
We don't want to invest in things that are exploitative or harmful in terms of carrying negative cultural narratives. There have been historically, because I think because of a lot of the lack of diversity in Hollywood, historically some very harmful tropes. I'll give you one that has been used extensively, the dumb blonde trope in Hollywood. And if you look at old movies and television shows, that is a pervasive comic narrative. And at the end of the day, it's actually deeply misogynistic. And so we want to avoid management teams and companies that rely on outdated apparatus when it comes to how we think about storytelling. And instead, we want to invest in companies that tell authentic stories, but in an empowering way, an authentic way.